Greetings, friend. How are you doing today? I have a question for you tonight. Just one question tonight. Have you ever heard somebody, perhaps not saying it to you, but perhaps saying it to somebody, or perhaps you watch a movie or something like that and say, don't be emotional. Don't be emotional. And a lot of time we hear that. And over time, we a lot usually this is something that we hear when we're growing up. And in for some people, it might even be something that your parents says to you. Say you get upset over something, whether you get angry or you get sad or something like that, and your teacher, your parents, somebody older than you say, "Don't be emotional. Don't be so emotional." And it kind of over time actually teach us subconsciously that being emotional, having emotions is not a good thing. Now, the person that says that, perhaps with all good intentions, mean to say you can have some emotions, but don't have too much emotion. But then, how much is too much emotions, right? Because for everybody, it's different. For somebody who is typically very chill and cool, or perhaps people from certain culture, certain custom, any expressions of emotions is emotional, while some other people, um, a lot of expressions of emotions, of our feelings, is completely normal. But then, so the question is for somebody who is growing up in a custom. Thank you for joining me, friend. In a custom or culture who with people saying, "Don't be emotional," then we say, okay, so I should not be having a lot of emotions. And in many Western culture, in a lot of Eastern culture, actually, with my background in Indonesia, Indonesians, Chinese, a lot of Eastern culture, as well as, strangely enough, a lot of the what some people call the Anglos culture. So, in other words, people that has with background from British influence, they say, don't be emotional. It's not good to be expressing too much emotion. And over time, it make us feel as if it's not a good thing to have emotions. That it's embarrassing to cry. It's definitely inappropriate to scream. And then even if you are happy, then don't be too extravagant about your happiness. Then just yeah, you want to be happy and you can be cheering and things, but don't go all out. Like hold your emotions, control your emotions. And I grow up hearing that, control your emotions, self-control, self-control. And over time, it's kind of like almost make it bad for us to feel emotions. And there is a lot of different things, a lot of time out there, particularly in the internet nowadays, that says, oh, this is how you can control your emotion and control your emotions. And, it's actually not a good thing to be not emotional. I invite you to feel your emotion, to feel your emotions, to really, really feel your emotions, to get in touch with it, to acknowledge it, and to express it. Why? Because when we feel an emotion, a feeling, and then we have this thing in our mind saying, don't be emotional. Then we either try to suppress it or we try to run away from it. Now, if it happened to be, which is less common, if it happened to be good emotions, then still there is a reasons we don't always have as much fun and our heart doesn't grow as big as we could allow it to. If we try to dampen the joy and the fun and the cheers and the celebration that we're feeling in our heart. Let's say, we hear something that just we just really love and we're like, yay, but at the same time we're like, don't be too emotional. Okay, instead of we're like, yay, we're like, yay. Okay, feel the difference. It's like you're not allowing yourself to express your joy. And over time, it just dampen us. And it's almost like a flowers that you're always covering and covering. And you like, if you have a tree, like this bonsai tree, and you're like, nah, don't get too big there. Don't get too big. You're gonna stop it. It's gonna stop it. Well, do we want to be a bonsai versions of ourselves? I personally wouldn't. So I don't know about you, but that's what happened if we keep saying, oh, don't if you feel something wonderful, don't get too extravagant about it. Just cut it out, control it. Then we, even as we are experiencing joy, even as we are experiencing wonderful thing, we kind of become a bonsai version of ourselves. And even more importantly, a lot of the emotions that we feel are not necessarily happiness and joy. It's emotions that we particularly don't particularly desire usually. And in those cases, if we say, don't be emotional, and usually the majority of the time when people say something in the vicinity of don't be emotional to someone else's, it's on undesirable emotion, whether it's anger, whether it's sadness, whether it's or what have you. And in those scenario, if we say don't be emotional, what happens is we start pushing it in, pushing it in, pushing it in, pushing it in, or we try to run away from it. And I invite people, and if you talk to grief specialists, we welcome people to feel our feelings. Why? Because those feelings that we keep pushing away and pushing away and pushing away, over times they become toxic. At the beginning, a lot of people that come to me, as well as many other grief specialists, not necessarily for a grief that just happened, particularly if it is not somebody passing away. Somebody passing away may be a little different story. But when it is not somebody passing away, the majority of people who come to me as a grief specialist is not for something that just happened, but it's actually a cumulative thing. Particularly people who come to me for dance away sadness. It's something that cumulative. Somebody had something happen, and the person push it away and then push it away and push it away, and one after another, and then it's eventually just becomes so much. While if we had addressed it each time immediately, you probably will be much less likely needing a grief coach or a grief specialist. And so that's why if we feel something, that's why in my book Seeking Peace here, I actually recommend that if something happened that you don't feel right with you, the first thing is to acknowledge it. Instead of trying to push it away or run away from it, have you ever have like an abscess or an infection? That is unpleasant. That's what unpleasant feeling was. It's like an abscess or an infection. And now imagine you have an infection or an abscess inside of you, inside of your chest, or in your heart. And you're like, I don't want to be feeling this. I don't want to be bothered by this. I'm gonna just kind of push it away and push it away and keep ignoring the symptom, keep ignoring the symptom, keep ignoring the symptoms. What happened is that that abscess, which is the unpleasant feelings that we're feeling, unpleasant emotion that we're feeling, over time doesn't clear up on its own. Over time, it just gets worse and worse, and then eventually it will cause a rampaging infections, and then it's eventually will influence our life. And so that's why if we're feeling emotion, instead of saying don't be emotional, don't be emotional, it's good to feel our emotion. Now there is a difference between allowing ourselves to feel our emotion and to acknowledge and to face it. Okay, I'm feeling upset right now, I'm feeling sad, and I always invite people to write it down, to express it in one way or another, and just face it, face the emotion, and say I'm feeling upset, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling worry, and what have you. There is a difference between that and allowing our emotion to master us, to be our master. There is a difference between feeling an emotions and being controlled by our emotions. What we don't want to do is when to lose. Thank you, Karen. What we don't want to do is to completely be controlled by our emotions. So, in other words, for instance, you might feel sad. For instance, with some when somebody close to me, let's say, passed away. I have this thing that I learned to do now. Now, in the past, long time ago, um, growing up being told, be strong, don't cry so much, um, don't be too emotional. I took it the wrong way. I took it, which is the way I mentioned earlier. I say, don't be emotional, be strong, don't cry too much. Such that even when somebody close to me, such as my grandfather passed away, I gotta be strong, I wouldn't be emotional, and I didn't cry. There was time when my grandfather passed away, and I didn't cry because I got to be strong. I've been growing up the last few years. I've been told, be strong, don't be emotional. Okay, be strong, don't be emotional, don't cry. And then I was being told that I was not caring because I didn't cry, and then I got completely confused. But that was then. Anyhow, so that was being don't be emotional. And how many times we tell ourselves, perhaps we told other people, but how many times we tell ourselves, don't cry, don't cry, don't feel bad, don't feel bad, don't feel bad. And what we want to do is just allow ourselves to do that, but not being controlled by our emotions. So in other words, let's say somebody that nowadays what I do is, if somebody close to me, and it doesn't have to be a family member, somebody close to me, my family member, my relatives or close friends passed away, or even if somebody just I happen to know. There was one time a couple years ago, there was a somebody who is like a celebrity that passed away, and for some reason the persons were inspiring to me and almost like a model to me, and the person passed away, and I was quite sad. I was quite sad because of that. And I just allow myself to feel my emotions, and I actually took a whole day and cried. Nowadays, depending on what happened, I would just sit there and allow myself to cry and cry and cry and cry and cry and cry and cry, if that's what I feel like doing, for somewhere between 1 to 3 days. but but it does not mean to just suddenly losing it all together and then crying in all different places and not be, and crying in front of all the clients and so forth. It's at the same time I still acknowledge myself. I address it immediately. We want to be able to address our emotion as it comes out, whether it is anger. If there's something happening with you, let's say at work, and you feel anger, you're like, oh God, now you don't want to lose it all together and went after somebody, and then you got sued for harassment or something like that. But also you don't want to push it in and say, oh, you know what? I'm just gonna be cool. I'm just gonna be cool. I'm not gonna. I didn't really get upset there. I didn't really get upset. Well, you actually did get upset. What you might want to do is, if you need to go somewhere and scream for a moment, then do that, and then come back and then say, okay, yeah, I am angry. I'm very angry about this, but at the same time, you can feel emotion without being controlled by your emotions. So you can say, okay, let's stop there. This is making me very angry, or this is making me very sad, or this is making me feel this way or the other. This is making me very angry. This is making me very sad. Let's stop there. So this is not continuing. And yes, I'm admitting, and I'm facing that I'm angry, that I am sad, that I am worried, or whatever that you have, or perhaps I'm very happy. But I'm admitting that, and I am facing that right on the face, and so we're going to address this. And if we cannot address this at this very moment, we're going to, unless the emotions goes away, I'm not going to say, okay, I'm angry right now, but I'm just gonna push it away and keep going on and marching and be strong and put a good face. Now, perhaps we cannot address it at the time, but if you still feel angry afterward, then we want to address it as soon as we possibly can in a civilized manner, which is then we feel our emotion and we are at the same time be in control of our emotion, not well pushing away our emotion, because then when you're pushing away your emotions, when you are trying to run away from your emotions, eventually the emotion will control you. It's kind of work in a funny way like that. If you face the emotions right away and then you say, okay, even if I cannot address it right now, let's say somebody's screaming at you and you don't want to scream back at the person because then it's just, you cannot fight fire with fire. You're like, okay, I'm angry, I'm going to stop this. But I am angry, and then I'm going to address this. Somebody was screaming at me a few weeks ago now, and for me it doesn't bother me as much. But at the same time, I didn't want to be screamed again, and so I didn't scream back at the moment. But afterward, I said, okay, I noticed that you were screaming at me, and it doesn't make me angry at the moment, but I also will not appreciate if that would happen again. So I address it that very same day, not by screaming back, but it's like that was not nice, and we're going to address this. So we want to face our emotion. We actually want to feel our emotion, feel our emotions, but at the same time, as Mandino say, and we've been studying this book here on the 10 tools, 10 primary tools on becoming very successful in our life. His scroll number 6, his 6 tools is be a master of our emotion. And that does not mean to not feel our emotions, but that means we want to actually feel our emotions, but not allowing us to be controlled by our emotion. And actually, one way to not be controlled by our emotion eventually is by facing it right on. It's almost like if you have an infection, face it, clean it up right away, and instead of trying to push it away or try to run away from it. Being a doctor, I know that doesn't work, and so face it and clean it up right away. Face the emotion, feel the emotion, and clean it up right there, right then, if you can, or sometime really, really soon. And then we actually be a master of our emotions instead of if we're trying to push it away or to dampen it or something. That thing, whatever the emotion or whatever the infections, will turn around and actually control us, and to the point it can even ruin our life. And so I invite you, if you like to just join me. If there is any emotion that you notice, perhaps you have been expressing your emotions very, very well. You face them all right away. But if there is something that still kind of caught your mind and your heart after you listen to this, you're like, oh yeah, that thing that happened 3 months ago, or perhaps that thing that happened 3 years ago. And whenever I remember about it, I'm kind of still going, or whenever I remember about it, I'm still kind of like, oh, or sad or something. We want to face it. We want to face it, and we want to say, okay, this thing is an emotions that I push away, or I tried to push away, but apparently it didn't push away because it can still come back and haunt me now. Or perhaps it's something reasons that happen. Then please, if you like to just address it such that it doesn't keep bugging you, and then like an infections, it's eventually turn around and cause problem. And not every emotions need to be clear. So I have a friend who's every time he uses anger as fuel. So he doesn't mind getting angry of things. He uses it as a fuel, and then he turn it around and then make him even more successful. Very interesting process. But certain things work just fine. But it is those things that might bother you either at the moment or from the past that still bother you. We want to just face it and be a master of it by facing it instead of allowing it to linger, and then it's kind of like spinning around in our system and eventually master us. And so please feel welcome to share in the comment below if there is an emotions that you would love to clear by the end of this week or perhaps today. Please feel welcome to share your feedback in the comment below. Thank you for your feedback, Karen. And please feel welcome to share this video with anyone that you'd love to. And this is Burjit with From Grieving to Joyful Living. I thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you can allow yourself to feel whatever your emotion is to the fullest. And that actually will allow you to to be the master of your emotion, and instead of your emotions mastering you. And feel welcome to share if you have anything that you like to share in the comment below, and I look forward to see you again very, very soon.